Okay, we shall begin. Welcome everyone, and thank you for coming along to our first 2025 webinar, Building a Strong B2B Campaign Foundation. I'm Leonie Saison, Director of Article Writers Australia, and my co-host is Johnna Ehmke, Managing Director of Kaleidoscope Marketing and Events. So before we dive in, just a few housekeeping notes. The session is being recorded and we'll be sharing both the recording and the presentation slides with you by email after the webinar. To ensure a smooth experience for everyone, all attendees have been muted, but we do encourage you to engage by submitting any questions into the Q&A chat, and we'll address as many of those as possible during a session at the end. So being a B2B marketing manager can be frustrating. You can put tremendous effort into planning a campaign and feel quite confident that it's going to hit the mark, only to find that stakeholders start pushing and pulling the campaign in different directions, the goalposts get shifted, everything turns to chaos, and nobody's happy with the end result. And when a campaign falls flat, the stakeholders aren't going to blame themselves. The way to save your sanity and your campaigns is to develop maestro-level skills to keep everything and everyone on track. And the key is in building the strongest possible campaign foundation. So today's webinar is the first in a series, and we'll be covering stakeholder management, setting KPIs, and nurture strategies. There are 2 more webinars in this first series planned for March, and we'll let you know the dates when they become available. And those sessions will go more in depth on aligning strategy across channels, content development, leveraging technology, optimization, testing, and measuring success. So to use our time effectively today, we're not going to go into detail on every slide because we want to be sure to cover the information that we think you'll find most beneficial. Some of the material is for you to access later and read at your leisure. And I will now hand over to Johnna to kick us off with the discussion on stakeholder management.
Great, thanks, Leonie. So stakeholder management is a big part of what we do as being B2B marketers. So building those strong relationships gives you that solid foundation for your campaign planning. Now, this part isn't always easy. It takes mapping and planning and a lot of babysitting. And yeah, when you're strapped for time, it's really a step that's tempting to skip. But trust me, it's worth it and sets you up for success. So let's dive into a conversation on stakeholder management. So stakeholder management, it's just all about keeping your decision makers, which are both internal and external, aligned and working together for the best results. There are a ton of moving parts, as you know, in campaigns. So I'm sure that there are other departments on here that are on the list, but you get the general idea that at any given time, you have a lot of balls up in the air with different stakeholders. So let's go into how do you tailor your approach? Great, you have an idea that you have a very long list of stakeholders. Customizing your approach is what's going to help the stakeholders see the value, whether it's a big picture impact for your executives or growth for your partner network. And obviously your sales team cares about things differently than your finance team or your legal team. So to get this right, your communication and your execution of the campaign flows way smoother. So there are 4 categories of stakeholders. Each of them have a different level of influence and interest. Some are shaping the big decisions, while others just need to kind of feel like they're in the loop and they want to stay informed. Understanding where they fit helps you prioritize your efforts and helps you communicate effectively. Do you manage them closely? Are you keeping them informed? Are you monitoring regular input? Or are you just, again, making them feel like they're in the loop? They're not highly influential in your campaign activities. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at stakeholder mapping. So the graphic that you see on here is the most common matrix. You probably have all seen it. It's called either the Mendeley matrix or it's often called the power interest grid. So what this does is it takes a y-axis and maps the level of interest, meaning how much are the stakeholders impacted by the outcome of the project. Then the x-axis measures the stakeholders' level of influence, or how much of the stakeholder can really make a big impact on your campaign. So let's talk a little bit about how to build one. First, start by making a list of all your key stakeholders, and those are both internal and external again. who will be involved, who will be impacted. Next, evaluate their relevance, their influence, and how willing are they to get involved. Then use a matrix like this one to plot your stakeholders based on, again, those interest, influence, and attitude. Once your map is done, then it becomes time to prioritize. Figure out who needs the most attention and love based on their influence and their interest in your campaign. And then tailor your approach for each group. So your engagement strategies can be something like regular updates for some, maybe once a month you send an email, or they're like regular weekly check-ins. Again, it's going to be based on how involved they are. So I know I've made it look and sound very easy, but congrats, you've created your first stakeholder map. But again, we totally understand that it takes a lot of time and attention to get this done. Now, once you've done it, a reminder, keep a close watch on this because your stakeholder map will need to be updated. Your stakeholders will change, the priorities will change. So it really does need to remain a dynamic document. Okay, so let's roll up our sleeves and then let's dive into some tactical moves. Now, there's a lot on this slide, and I'm not going to go through all of these. I'm just going to highlight some that I've personally struggled with as a campaign manager. Let's start. I'm going to say active listening. So my background is in tech and in data, and so my stakeholders are oftentimes product management people or data specialists, a little bit out of my wheelhouse. So I do a lot of active listening, repeating explanations back to them to get clarity and to demonstrate understanding. It really helps to get that understanding at the beginning versus at the end. Anticipating objections. Sometimes if I know that there's going to be a little bit of a conflict or there's a little more discussion around something that involves just one of my stakeholders, I'll actually do that in advance of a team meeting. It just kind of makes you're going to save time and you're going to keep everything on track. You're not going to get off course with those one-on-one conversations. And I'd probably say my last one would be choosing my battles wisely, because we do know and we should be expecting that there's going to be a lot of bumps along the way across all of our stakeholders. So just choose the ones that are actually the most critical to getting your work and your execution done. Okay, now I'm going to do a poll here. So if you can give me a minute, I'm going to get this launched. It's a little bit about learning more about your stakeholder engagement. Okay, so what is your biggest challenge when it comes to getting buy-in on your campaigns? Is it dealing with conflicting priorities, managing too much feedback, keeping your stakeholders engaged throughout the project, explaining the campaign values, or just convincing them that marketing isn't about making just pretty slides? All right, if everyone can make their selection. Okay. I'm not going to lie, I am not surprised on the highest response, which was managing too much feedback. I would only, give you some advice to just set some clear guidelines for feedback and establish a structured process for collecting and reviewing that feedback. What I've done in the past, where sometimes you don't get consensus between your stakeholders, we've elected one person as the person that collects all of the stakeholder feedback before it even comes to marketing, because oftentimes we're not the right person, to be doing the negotiation between sales and product, as an example. So oftentimes I'll elect one person to kind of manage all of that feedback, so it only comes to me as the marketing person in one lump, which makes my life a lot easier. Okay, great. Thank you for that. Okay, so we've talked about challenges. I'm just going to also hit these really quickly. We're going to take a quick look at some of the common challenges that you're probably facing with your trickier stakeholders. And then just kind of looking at some ways that you can maybe turn those challenges into some real opportunities. Lack of engagement, conflicting priorities, resistance to change, getting limited buy-in, unrealistic expectations. This next one is the one that I've had the most difficulties with, and it's the stakeholders just dragging their feet. They're not managing that schedule to the level that you're managing that. So I love using those Outlook nudges where when you send an email, you can send them a reminder in a week to make sure that they're following up. I've used those and I've had some pretty good luck with those. Making sure that your stakeholders are aligned. Sometimes you'll find you have silos and the lack of collaboration. And then obviously those execs like to come in at the last minute and mess things up a little bit. And you can do that by just reframing the adjustments and letting them know that it's not going to be a major overhaul, but you can incorporate those on the fly. Okay, so that's stakeholder management. So these framework and tools that we've gone through, yes, they're helpful, but at the end of the day, it's all about people when it comes to stakeholder management. Understand their motivations, be flexible, know and expect what their behaviors are and how they like to connect with each other. So I'm going to hand it back over to Leonie to do a wrap-up of what we just covered.
Thank you, Johnna. So summarising the takeaways, it's a delicate balance. The do's, it's important to communicate with stakeholders and understand their perspectives, involve them in the decision-making and manage their expectations. When stakeholders feel their needs are being considered and they feel part of the process, you're less likely to meet the type of resistance and disagreement that takes the campaign in the wrong direction. And the don'ts, don't be inflexible or ignore feedback. The insights of stakeholders could help you improve some elements of the campaign. And don't ignore any issues that seem to be simmering because they will be much harder to deal with if they reach boiling point. And so for an action item on the stakeholders, develop a stakeholder map to identify key influencers and decision makers, ensuring that your campaign plan aligns with their priorities and maximises engagement for success. Now, we have a case study that you can read at your leisure. This article nicely illustrates the impact that good stakeholder alignment can have. And now back to Johnna, and we're going to talk about KPIs.
Okay, thanks, Leonie. Let's talk KPIs. This can either be one of your favorite things or one of your least favorite things as a campaign manager. But the big categories are around lead gen, brand awareness, and retention. So this list that you're looking at on this slide is a list of the most used metrics, but I'm going to assume that there are probably others that you are tracking as well. So this list is not exhaustive. So for lead gen, it's about how many leads you get and how many are converting. So conversion rates are key here. And let's face it, if you're not converting your leads, all the leads in the world won't make a difference. Your brand awareness KPIs are around reach and how many people know you and engage with your content. It's impressions, clicks, social interactions. The more recognition you build, the bigger your snowball effect. And then finally, retention and satisfaction. Keeping your customers is obviously more cost effective than constantly finding new ones. So your retention metrics are around customer satisfaction, repeat purchases, and other loyalty type metrics. So again, this slide is not exhaustive. Just pick the ones that are most important to your campaigns. Okay, so when setting your KPIs, remember to keep them smart. We've all heard of SMART. But what is SMART again? It's specific, it's measurable, it's achievable, it's relevant, and it's time-bound. So we've included a few examples here for your reference. Now, these I can struggle with. I'm sure you feel my pain. They can be frustrating to get all of the pieces together to do this, but studies show that businesses with SMART goals are 30% more likely to hit their targets. So we just did stakeholder management. So use some of those skills to help you get the bits and bobs that you need to do your SMART goals. Okay, so understanding KPIs at each stage of the sales funnel is really important. Your KPIs are going to change depending on where your customers are in their journey. So your top of the funnel KPIs like impressions and clicks show how well you're casting your net. The awareness stage is all about getting your brand out there, sparking curiosity, because if they don't know you, they can't consider you, right? So at the consideration stage, you're starting to build out trust. You're helping those prospects understand how your solution can solve their problem. So measuring KPIs using open rates, click-through rates, KPIs like that. The decision stage is that stage where you're showing your value and really where you differentiate yourself against your competition. Turn that interest into action by guiding those prospects through their buying decision. Retention stage focuses on keeping those existing customers engaged and satisfied, making sure they continue to see the value in your product and stay loyal to you. And then advocacy just takes retention to the next level, turning those happy customers into brand advocates who will spread the word and boost that credibility through word of mouth, which is one of my most favorite tactics. Okay, so oops, I'm actually going to do a poll right now. Apologies for that. So I'm going to launch this next poll on KPIs. So if you could take just a second to answer these. So this happens to all of us. Your KPIs are going off track. What is your first course of action? Do you reassess and adjust the KPIs themselves? Are you shifting your budgets or resources to those underperforming areas? Are you testing new strategies and tweaking your campaign? Consulting with your stakeholders to brainstorm solutions? Reviewing the data and living it meticulously? Or do you panic and just consider taking a career change to llama farming? Go ahead and make a choice now on what is your first course of action. Okay, so it looked like we have a tie between testing new strategies and campaign tweaks and reviewing and analyzing the data meticulously. So we have all been there and done that. So this next slide, and thank you for giving us that information. This next slide really goes into that. So your KPIs aren't where you want them to do. You've got to put both your creative and analytical hats on. The creativity is what sparks the fresh ideas, but without the analysis, you really won't know what's working. So the real magic happens when you blend the both of these. So on creative approaches, we've talked about refining your messaging, adjusting your creative, test new channels. Don't be shy about looking at other ways you might find your audience, improving targeting with personalization, and then A/B testing. I'm a huge advocate of doing A/B testing, whether it's headlines, call to actions, landing pages. And then on the analytical side, find where the breakdown is. Where are the leaks in your sales funnel? Comparing past data, spotting trends, what has shifted in the business, reallocating your budget, shifting your spend to higher performing tactics. And then last but not least, again, align with those stakeholders and then adjust any expectations that don't seem like they're aligned. So again, when managing your KPIs, it's super important because they keep you on track and help you see what's working. They let you measure progress, make adjustments, and guide your decisions as you go. So without them, it's like a bit like driving blindfolded, right? So I'm going to hand it back to Leonie for a summary of KPIs.
Thank you, Johnna. So just to summarise the KPI takeaways, set specific and realistic KPIs that are aligned with business and marketing objectives and are tailored to the campaign. Take a proactive approach to monitoring progress so that you can make adjustments along the way. And don't limit your KPIs to sales because brand awareness, engagement, and customer satisfaction might be important success indicators for a campaign. So the action item for this section is to create a KPI lifeline plan. Pick a KPI that's struggling and write down 3 quick pivots that you could make if it doesn't improve in the next 30 days so that you're ready to act fast if that occurs. And again, we have a case study that you can have a bit of a look at. This article illustrates the difference that good KPIs can make. And I will hand back to Johnna to dive into lead nurture strategies.
All right, thanks, Leonie. I'm actually going to kick off this section with our last poll. So it should pop up in a minute. We're going to talk about what component of your B2B campaign strategy do you find most challenging? Is it crafting your personalized content? Is it aligning sales and marketing for a seamless handoff? Automating without losing that human touch? Segmentation? Or pretending that you're not checking CRM every few minutes to see what your lead updates are? So let us know where you find nurture strategies most challenging. Yes. Okay, they're coming in. And again, I'm not really surprised. It's spread across all of them, but it looks like aligning sales and marketing usually does float to the top when it comes to lead management. So yeah, I mean, setting up clear lead qualification criteria and establishing those regular check-ins between teams is really important. A shared CRM with lead scoring helps ensure that no hot leads get lost. We'll hit on that a little bit on these next slides. Okay, so essentially nurturing is part of your campaign plan where you have the chance to build a very meaningful relationship with your leads. And it could
Well, the sound has gone, Johnna. Can't hear you. No, no, can't hear you at all.
now, has that changed anything?
That's it. That's better. Back on.
A little bit of a glitch there. Apologies, everybody. Okay, so yes, it's crucial to be thinking about your nurture, even though it usually happens at the end. Think about it at the start of your campaign because it's not just about getting leads in the door, it's about keeping them there. So a strong nurture ensures that your leads remain engaged rather than going cold. It helps your sales team get better qualified prospects. Making sure you're always aligning with your buyer needs at every and behaviors at every stage. And then again, when you have this nice consistency, it's going to help preserve your brand authority and trust during the decision-making process. Now, real quick, I did want to cover off the difference between drip marketing and lead nurturing. Now, sometimes there can be confusion between the two. A drip campaign is when you send a series of pre-scheduled automated emails, like an onboarding campaign where you're doing a welcome email followed by a tip or a case study over a few days. Your nurture campaign, however, is more personalized. So you'd be sending content based on where the lead is in their journey, what their behaviors are, aligning it to a relevant case study or a webinar invitation to continue to build that relationship over time. So by planning this nurture strategy alongside your other campaign activities, you're going to create that ongoing value at every stage because it's a long-term game. It's not just a short little race, right? Okay, so I'm going to break down the components of a lead nurture strategy. So always start with your lead segmentation and targeting. You've got to know who you're talking to in order to tailor your approach. If you don't have your personas done at this stage, this is really where you need to nail them. Lead scoring, lead scoring is a challenging exercise, but it's crucial to ensure you're focusing your efforts on those leads that are likely to convert, scoring them based on their behaviors. And again, your sales team probably loves this strategy or this part of the strategy because it's really what's going to help develop the leads before you hand it over to sales staff. Your content mapping and personalization is key because your messaging needs to match where your leads are in that journey. So use that dynamic content based on their behavior to keep it timely and to keep it relevant. And then finally, a multi-channel engagement, because we're not just talking emails here. You're using a range of touch points, whether it's social media, webinars, or events, because you really need to keep that conversation going and meet your needs where they are. And then I'm going to break it down a little bit further into a step-by-step. So you have a clear guide on that nurture strategy building. So first, identify your buyer personas. We mentioned that in the last slide, and your customer journeys. This is more than just collecting the data. It's really understanding your audience. So you can create the personas that capture those emotional triggers and pain points at every stage of their journey. When it comes to mapping the content to these buyer stages, relevance is everything. So you need content that speaks directly to your buyers.
building that trust along the way, showing that you really understand where they're at in their decision making. Then implementing your lead scoring and your automation. This is really where you start to get super smart with your nurturing. Lead scoring will help you figure out which leads are most likely to convert, and that the automation is going to make sure that you're following up with the right message at the right time. And then finally, getting your sales and marketing to work together is key for timely lead nurturing. So when both teams are in sync, your lead quality is high, and then they can follow up and act on those leads faster and more effectively. Let's be honest, sales teams sometimes struggle with following up on leads quickly, especially if they're not aligned with their nurture strategies. So very important on the nurture side of your campaign to make sure that sales is highly integrated with your strategy. So Leonie, I'm going to hand it over to you for a quick recap.
Okay, so just to summarise the lead nurturing, we know it's getting harder by the day to get people's attention, but bombarding them isn't the answer. So instead, it's all about ensuring that marketing and sales are aligned and implementing the lead scoring. Create follow-up content that's aligned with the buyer journey and personalised rather than generic, and incorporate multiple channels into your plan. Test and optimise for continual improvement. So the action item on that is to develop or review your lead scoring program criteria or scoring values to ensure that it accurately identifies high potential leads and prioritises efforts on the leads that are most likely to convert. Now, we have another interesting case study based on BlueScope Steel's campaign to re-engage cold leads. And again, so there's a link to that on the slides, and which you will receive later. And now back to Johnna for some tips on how to put these strategies into action. You've lost your sound again, Johnna.
Any better?
That's it. Put you back.
Apologies, everyone. I'm not sure what's happening with my mic today.
It's a little
right,
bit
so
echoey. Sound's gone. It's gone again.
Okay, I just better.
Got you back.
Okay, fingers crossed it'll stay working for the rest of our time today. Okay, so before we finish up and start our Q&A, a quick reminder. So for our Q&A section, just click on the Q&A icon and drop your questions in there. We'll go through those next. But we wanted to give you some quick takeaways on how you can start putting what we've talked about today into action with the B2B campaign. So there are a couple of suggestions for each one of the sections that we talked about today. We'll go into depth on all of them. For stakeholder management, I personally found that setting clear roles to be really important. So if I have a stakeholder that suggests something that's a bit off track, I'll be very diplomatic and say, great idea, but we'll revisit in the next phase. It kind of keeps things on course, but I always make sure I keep that list so I have it for future consideration if I need to refer back to it. I don't just forget. I also love running quick KPI rescue brainstorms. I grab a stakeholder, sometimes it's in one of those hallway conversations. Sit down for about 10 minutes, throw around some ideas, find a few quick wins to boost those underperforming KPIs. It's really amazing how much you can do under those kind of quick hit kind of circumstances. And then another ongoing pain point, if your sales isn't following up on those hard-earned leads, set a clear follow-up timeline to go in accordance with your lead nurture or your lead scoring. Within whether it's 28 hours, 48 hours of the lead engagement. And don't forget to communicate it to the sales management team for governance. To just make sure that everyone stays on track and everything keeps moving forward to closing that sale. Okay, so I'm going to go next into some Q&As. Let me see. Have any questions? Does anybody have any questions before I start to go through these? I'll check real quick if anyone's put them in chat. Okay, here we go. Here's Here's a stakeholder question. What's the best way to manage stakeholders who have conflicting priorities? Yes. It's all about communication, being transparent about the trade-offs and finding that common ground. Focus to what aligns with the bigger picture and keep them updated on the progress. And of course, compromise is key. Always keep the goal in sight. But what I've done, and I never like creating more work for myself, but oftentimes it keeps things moving. If they're conflicting priorities are keeping you from getting your input, I'll oftentimes do some of the work myself and then just ask for approvals. Does tend to keep things flowing a little bit. Okay, so how do you determine the right cadence for nurturing leads without losing their interest? I'd have to say that this is actually, it will depend on your audience, but a good rule of thumb is to find that rhythm that feels natural, right? So use your own instincts to whether this is too much or this is too little. Start with frequent touch points like weekly emails, then scale back as the relationship deepens. You want to go ahead and continue to test and tweak based on engagement. So if they're responding well, you can kind of ease off a little bit. But if you're finding that they're going quiet, try re-engaging and trying something fresh. A little more. How do you balance tracking KPIs with the day-to-day demands of managing multiple campaigns? So yes, honestly, it's all about prioritizing, and it just takes practice. Keep your eyes really simple and relevant to what's happening right now. Set up some automated reports to save time on the big stuff. Use your CRM tools, use your marketing automation tools, so you can manage and keep, bookmark the ones that you frequent so you can go to those really quickly. That way you're not drowning in data, but still staying on top. What's a good starting point for lead qualification? I work in a mining supply market. We have very broad range of aspects and personalities. For lead qualification, I'm going to assume that these are new, so it's new prospects. If you've done your personas, you'll understand what their behavioral triggers are and what their pain points are. I'd always go back to that persona and find out what can I do to meet them where they are. I don't know the mining supply market really well, but if you know your audience, just kind of go back and look at and talk to your sales team because they know it's going to convert the highest. They actually have a lot of really good insight because they're talking to existing clients. Find out what really has motivated them to make the final decision to buy and kind of work backwards from that, making sure that you know where they are. Are they engaging with us through our newsletters? Are they finding us on social media, perhaps? And then just kind of build from there, understanding what the KPIs are within each one of those channels, that multi-channel thing. Okay. All right. So I think it's time to move beyond Q&A and just kind of move towards our wrap-up.
Okay, fantastic. So we've managed to keep it on time. We had so much to get through. Thank you all for joining us today. I hope you found today's session insightful. So please feel free to reach out to either Johnna or myself if we can be of any assistance to you. And please do connect with us on LinkedIn if we're not already connected. And just a reminder that we'll be sending you out the presentation via email along with a link to the recorded webinar on YouTube. And we do have those 2 webinars upcoming in March, so we will get you that information as soon as the dates are set. And we look forward to seeing you at the next one.